I'd like to call this meeting to order. Thanks everyone for coming. My name is John Cunningham. I'm the Deputy Warden of the Municipality District of Yarmouth, and I'm also the Chairperson of the Planning Advisory Committee. Thank you very much for coming. As you're all aware, this is a public meeting session. This is going to take approximately 1 hour. What we're going to do here first is Morris is going to go over the summary key changes overview, and then the draft submission bylaw, and any comments or suggestions that you may have, I'll call you. Could you please state your names? And also one more thing, could everyone please turn the ringers on your phones to vibrate? Myself included. So once again, thank you very much for coming, everyone. And we'll move on to item number 3, revisions to the draft subdivision bylaw. 3.1, summary of key changes. Mr. Lloyd, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll take a few minutes and run through the key changes in the bylaw. This process began about 9 or 10 months ago with a fairly extensive public consultation process involving meeting with individuals, meeting with particular groups of people, some focus groups and so forth, and a public open house in the lobby of the building here. The purpose of that was to identify the concerns that people had with the old subdivision bylaw and the issues that perhaps could be addressed by council in the revised bylaw. The two major issues that emerged from the discussion was the matter of subdivision by instrument, some concern that there was some potential difficulties that could be brought forward through that process. And the other major change that was identified during the public consultation process was the specifications for the design and construction of private roads and a system for maintenance of private roads. With regards to the use of subdivision by instrument, the recommendation that has come forward from the process is that this process be removed except for the matter of combining 2 or more lots into one lot, that it not be used in the sense of dividing properties into more than one lot, but that it be used to allow properties to come together. And under the Act, that is also a subdivision, by the way, even though it doesn't, you say, well, where's the subdivision? Well, under the Act, it's a subdivision. What we've done is, in the bylaw, the old bylaw, there were specifications for the design and construction of municipal services. In the current situation, those particular details of design and construction, with some exception on private roads, have been taken out of the subdivision bylaw and put into a manual called the Municipal Design Specifications. We have left in the subdivision bylaw some requirements for the construction of public roads. And we did that mainly because it's a little difficult to follow this manual if you're not a professional engineer or somebody who's used to working with these kind of documents. But this allows all of us to understand the general thrust of the changes for the construction of private roads a little bit better. One of the issues that did come up later on in the process was the matter of flag lots, and these are flag lots that look like a flagpole if you see them on a plan. They have a long driveway going up and then a long lot across the top. they were not really mentioned in the old bylaw very much, and we've included them in the new bylaw with the requirement that the width of the pole, if you like, be a little longer if you're way back from the road, and that's the requirement of Nova Scotia Power. There is a requirement that all subdivisions that are not served by a public road would be served by a private road unless there's a minimum of 4 lots or less, including the residual lot, so that you can subdivide off 4 lots without having to have a private road built in accordance with the specifications. But once you go into that 5th lot, or you go above 5 lots, then the requirement is that the private roads be built to the private road specifications. We have added a recommendation that you find in many subdivision bylaws, that there be a provision for parkland dedication in the subdivision bylaw, so that when a developer is subdividing the property, there be a requirement that a certain percentage, 5% of the property, equivalent of the property that's being subdivided, and that's where there's lots being created, that 5% of that area equivalent be put aside for public open space, or if there's no need for public open space, that the developer can pay cash in lieu of land, which would be used for other public open space purposes in the municipality. That requires a policy change in the municipal planning strategy, and we've outlined that policy statement in the summary that was circulated or posted on the internet. That's what I'm going through now. And it will go to PAC tonight as a separate little document with an amendment to the municipal planning strategy. That simply shows the relationship between the policy in the planning strategy and the requirements in the subdivision bylaw that have to be met. If you want to look at the 5% land, then there's a requirement that you look at the concept for an entire piece of land, not just a small portion of the land, even though part of the land may remain in resource lands and wouldn't be subject to the 5%, but it will give you a picture of the entire piece of property. So there's an amendment to the bylaw that requires a concept plan be submitted that shows the picture of the overall development, if you like. When we got to the issue of the maintenance of private roads, when we talked to a number of people who live on private roads now, some of them have formed informally, they have formed homeowners associations, and they've gotten together to maintain the private roads. In other instances, this approach hasn't worked, and some roads have been left in abeyance. What we're recommending here is that this would apply to new developments. It's not retroactive to old developments. We can't do that, unfortunately. That the developer would include in each deed a restrictive covenant that says the owner of that land will become a member of a homeowners association. So that means if you're subdividing, say, 20 lots, there's 20 members in that homeowners association, including any that have not yet been sold. So the developer has a membership for each of his lots that he hasn't sold, and the ones that's sold are the owners are the members of the homeowners association. Every property has one vote. A private road would be approved as a separate lot. This is sometimes an issue as to who owns the road and how is the ownership laid out. And there are a number of various ways that it's been done, but it's not approved as a separate lot, so it's difficult for somebody else to own the land. In this case, when a private road is built, it would be approved as a separate lot. And be run by the homeowners association. When the owner has sold 50% of the lots and he or she owns less than 50, then the private road is transferred to the homeowners association from the developer to the homeowners association, and that association is responsible for the maintenance of the road. I did make a note here that in some municipalities, the municipal government has passed a bylaw that allows the council to set an area rate to collect the funds for maintaining a private road. That's not in all of them by any means, but that's a separate matter outside of the bylaw here. That would be a separate bylaw in its own right. When we sent the bylaw out and when we posted it, you may have noticed it had some changes in red and some in blue. That just simply tracked the changes as we went through. The blue changes were the first one that we discussed, and then some of those, like the Parkland one, led to some of the changes that were shown in red. Those have all been consolidated now are in one color, which will go to the Planning Advisory Committee afterwards. But there are some definitions that need to be added because new definitions emerge, like what is a homeowners association, and those have been added to the revised one that will go later to the PAC tonight, along with any changes that emerge from this meeting that the PAC wishes to send forward. We also have to do some reformatting. I've left that to the very end because depending on what the decisions are made, we'll change the number of sections that we might change the number of sections we have, and that reformatting would be done at that time. And then we'll check the cross-references, but those are minor details. I think those are the major changes, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to answer questions or elaborate as you wish.
All right, since this is a public information participation meeting, I'm wondering if anyone sitting in the gallery has any questions or comments, concerns into the regards of what's before you.
Yeah, I do.
Before you start, could you please state your name?
Sandra Parsons, and I live in Dayton. And I just want to confirm, because in the letter that I received, which it didn't say that this was only going to be for new subdivisions. So if I'm understanding what he's saying, people who are currently living in subdivisions, it doesn't affect us. It's only for developers who are going to be starting new subdivisions.
Morris?
Yeah, yes, that's correct, Mr. Chairman. You can't make these things retroactive. There is the possibility that council could, again, under a separate bylaw, decide that, say, if there was a current development and they formed a homeowners association and came forward, that council could deal with that they could deal with that association, assuming the association could get control of the road, which is not always easy. But this particular bylaw is not retroactive. We can't make it retroactive to current situations.
And the other question that I had was, you talked about combining lots, which I hadn't read that either, and I'm just wondering, is that just for new subdivisions, or are we talking pre-existing ones?
There are two ways that you can subdivide a piece of property. You can hire a surveyor and get the surveyor to survey the boundaries and subdivide the property or combine two properties into one so that you have a proper surveyed boundary for the property. The other one is called subdivision by instrument, and in effect, and Roger will correct me if I'm wrong on this one, I'm sure, in effect, you don't have to have a surveyor of the property. You can have a document that shows the two properties, and you can come in and have them combined by applying without the survey of the property boundary. So what there are sometimes difficulties with survey subdivision by instrument because the property boundaries on some of the plans are not shown properly, and when you bring them together, it creates issues for the next door, and there have been instances where, not in this municipality, but in one very close that I looked at not too long ago, where a citizen just putting a line on a property didn't realize it, but they put the line right through a house, and then the subdivision was made, and you ended up with the house sitting across the property line, things like that. So the recommendation is that subdivision by instrument be allowed if you want to take two properties and bring them together, but not be allowed if you have a single property and you wanted to divide it into two or more properties.
You answer your question? One more thing, if you wouldn't mind, I know some people are sort of apprehensive of a microphone. I just received a note here, and I was supposed to mention it earlier. If you wouldn't mind coming up, and Councillor Patty Durkee would turn on the microphone for you, because we do record our meetings. If you wish not to, that's all right as well, but just so we can have a clear, concise description of what you said.
Over there as well, that's recording for the people on the line.
Yeah, it's also being live streamed as well. It's put a little bit more added pressure on you. All right, is there any more questions or comments from the gallery?
Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind. Could you state your name, please, and your question?
My name's Alan Hubbard. Yep. And one of the concerns that I have, and I've been on a private road for 7 years, and when I was sold the place, I was never told it was a private road, or that in the sense we had to take care of it. Now, for not doing the research, that's my fault. My problem is that after talking with people who know the road quite well in meetings here, we were told that we had to come up with 2/3 majority of the people on that road for the municipality to come fix the road from that point. And after that, it would be added to our taxes. And after that, we would have to maybe get a group together to keep the road in shape, for lack of a better word. So my question is that there is no way on the road I live on, you're going to get 2/3 of the people to actually agree to anything being put on their taxes. So where do we go from there, considering that we're not a new development? And this road's been there over 20 years, and they've been fighting for it for over that, since it's been there. And right now, we're just banging our heads against the wall again.
Do you want to add to that, Morris, or do you want me to tackle that one?
I think that would be yours to tackle, Mr. Chairman, but if I see you're floundering too much, I'll jump in and not let you drown or anything like that.
You hit the nail right on the head. The problem is a private road. Over the past 4 years, I believe it is, and I have an email here in that regards, because I kind of figured that question would come up. About 4 years ago, council tried to implement a homeowners association policy or a private roads policy. We had a lot of trouble with that, and a lot of the issues that we had was in regards to an issue that you just come up with, 2/3. Council at the time was very leery of trying to enact a bylaw so that we could put an area rate on all the homeowners, and also for the homeowners to create a homeowners association. Now, after reading this, one of the first recommendations I was going to bring back to council here next Wednesday night would be to reopen that policy and bylaw. So that would be Councillor Durkee, I believe you're the chair of that, or was? No, that's before full council now, policy and bylaws.
Right.
So we're going to have to make another stab at it. Now, in regards to getting people to ante up, I guess is the word you used, that's going to be a problem. And I was kind of hoping that the owners of the private road, or the people living on the private road, could come together and say, look, we need these potholes filled, we need a load of gravel. But as you say, I wish the CAO was here because I don't believe it's in the Municipal Government Act that we can enforce anything like that upon you. It would have to come through a homeowners association.
Well, my problem is that there's what, 17 or 18 houses on this road, and there are a fair amount at the start of the road, and they don't have to go through half of what the rest of us have to go through on this road. And those are the ones that are gonna be the issue to getting a 2/3. So where does that leave the rest of us? We pay our taxes. Why are we being left out? Or why do we have to fight and bang our heads to try to get something done to fix the road? And you can say.
Mr. Warden, could you answer have anything to say, add to that? Because I don't really know how to answer that question.
I can try. When that subdivision was originally developed and so on, the developer was supposed to bring the road up to, at that time, to highway standards, and Highways was going to take it over originally.
My
And-
understanding from researching into this road is that that road was up to highway standards, and that there was some falling out between whoever runs how the stuff is, the roads are done in the municipality, and him. And ever since then, this road has just been just foolishness.
It wouldn't have been anything back in the day with the municipality. It would have been between Highways and the developer. And when the developer stepped away, the people at that time were left with what was there. Highways wasn't going to take it over. And the municipal unit, at the time, was not interested in taking it over. Now, things have changed. The municipality will take over a road that has been built to highway standards, and we've taken over two that a developer done, but they were built to highway standards and had water and sewer in them, so they're right up to the highway standards. And the municipality now owns those roads and maintains them. But the road you're mentioning is nowhere near that for,
Well, definitely not, because it's been left for 20 years. Now, my question is that since you guys are trying to sell the road on a tax sale, who becomes liable for that road?
good question. A good question.
Makes
A
me
good
wonder.
question. I think as the deputy warden and chairperson was stating that you're going to have to form a homeowners association and then come before council and see what council can do. But like
Yeah.
you said, you're going to have to get all, and when we say, you know, what percentage that you may have to pay or the area rate and so on, you have no idea what that might be. It might only be an extra $100 on your taxes, or it might be $300 on your taxes. We have no idea to be able to get that road back to a standard of being maintained. And the homeowners association maintain that, not the municipality. If you want gravel on it, you let us know, figure out what the cost is from a contractor, find out if that's how much money has
Now,
been
that's
collected.
back to our 2/3, because the woman we talked to said that unless you had 2/3, the road would not be fixed by the municipality, and the road had to be finished to the Peterson Road. It couldn't stay a status quo. It had to be finished as the subdivision was designed.
I have
So
no knowledge of that.
somewhere,
No.
stuff's going to the right or the left, it's not going in the middle.
I personally have no knowledge of that. This is actually before my time. Correct me if I'm wrong, it was 1993 when the province stopped taking over private roads. That's been 27 years ago. Do you know if there's any previous history on that? Or how far, you said 20 years.
That road's been there 20 years.
More than that.
Yeah, more,
than that.
more.
Unfortunately, I can't answer your questions today, but if I could get your name and phone number, what I'll do is I'll mention this to CAO. She's not here this evening, and we can get in contact with you so we can get a little bit more, I can't answer your questions right now.
That's fine, that's fine.
And
I've said my piece.
it's been an ongoing issue, obviously, which I wasn't aware of. But I'll certainly like to get your name and number, and I'll ask the CAO some of these questions that you put forward tonight and
Most definitely.
see if we can move forward from there. But There's also, I wouldn't call it a problem, but something that council hasn't done, we've tried in the past, but we're going to have to again, is create the conditions so we can have a policy and bylaw in regards to private road ownership. But that, you're asking me questions that I have no previous experience
Then
at.
imagine how we feel. Because
Absolutely.
you can ask all the questions you want, but you get the same thing. I don't know, or it's not our problem.
Well, I can say this much, I don't know for sure, but since I do sit on council currently, I'll certainly make that effort to, before you leave, to get your name and number and see if we can come up to a resolution on that issue.
I appreciate that.
All right. Your name was Alan Hubbard, correct?
Yep.
All right, is there any more questions or comments from anyone in the gallery?
Thank you.
I just, what he was talking about.
Could you, if you wouldn't mind, go up to the mic, please? And state your name again?
Sandra Parsons, and it's off to what he was speaking of. You said you don't know what happens with roads, but what happens with regular property that people don't pay taxes on? Who do they get posted for tax sale, but who do they belong to once you've confiscated them from the owner for lack of taxes? Say it was a house.
Private road you're talking about?
I'm talking house. What do you do when a house gets confiscated for lack of taxes, or a woodlot that gets, something that's useful? Who gains ownership of it then?
The municipality district of Yarmouth does.
Okay, so what's the difference between a road and a house lot or a woodlot that,
We would have the deed then.
so
Rights to
you, there's,
property ownership. We don't own roads most generally.
but you're seizing it for lack of taxes, right? So it goes into nowhere land when it's seized for lack of taxes?
You have a property though, if I'm not mistaken,
No, 'cause I'm
trying to answer your
curious
question.
because our road will likely end up going that way because the owner's dead. So, and it's in a company, so,
And every piece of land out there is deeded.
yeah.
Somebody
It's
owns it.
deeded, it's in, when you go property online, it's deeded. There's a numbered company that owns it. It's a separate piece of property. And I'm guarantee you, if you look at their road, it's gonna be a separate piece of property that's deeded to somebody. And to my mind, it's no different, just because it doesn't have a value to the municipality is irrelevant. If it had a value, you've just said, it becomes yours, you take it. So now something that you don't want, you want to dump it off on the homeowners. And that's not right. I bought my house at a certain value. I didn't buy the road, and I should never be told that I have to buy that road.
I'm just looking here what Morissette wrote about private, about roads. I'm not trying to, Mr. Warden, your mic was flashing. Well, I look for that.
When, if I may, when a piece of property, whether it's a home or a vacant piece of property or forest land, is, comes up for a tax sale, the only time that the municipality becomes the owner of that, if nobody at that time wishes to purchase, because it goes to an auction.
Okay.
Before the deed or anything is transferred.
Okay.
Once it becomes property of the municipality, do we maintain it? Do we go in and cut the trees on the ground? No. Do we go down and paint that house that is now our property? We do our best to sell it, because it is not the mandate of a municipal unit to own property that should be out there in the tax.
And I
Now,
understand that 100%.
Yeah.
But you also have a liability that if someone has a car accident or slips and falls or, you know, has a broken leg because that road was icy, then there's going to be a liability, no different than the sidewalk in front of my house, or if someone comes up my driveway and breaks their leg. I have to have insurance. I have to make sure my property is maintained so that somebody doesn't get hurt. If I know there's a problem, then I'm liable for it. And I think it's terrible that you sit here and give these people no answer when you know darn well you become the owner of a property that doesn't sell at tax sale. And a road shouldn't be any different. It's
So-
unfortunate, it's
so-
not a nice property, but
So you're kind of suggesting that the municipality, anytime it takes over any of these private roads, that we bring them up to standards?
well, what I'm saying is
Now,
once.
you answer my question, please. Do you think the municipality should bring them up to standards?
Well,
Now, we have to, now,
And you know what? If you end up taking ownership of it, if it's the way the rules go, then it's the way the rules go. And if you have a liability, then I guess it needs to be maintained. Maybe not to this fancy standard that you're talking about, but at least that it's not full of potholes and that it does get salted or, my taxes have gone up every year that I lived where I'm living. I was the first person in there. I have not done one thing to my house or property, but every time somebody built a big fancy house next to me, my tax assessment went up $20,000. It's ridiculous because I didn't get one extra benefit from my taxes. I don't have snow removal. I don't have maintenance on my road. My kids didn't get picked up at my property. I have to bring my own garbage and compost bin to the public road,
Yeah.
and it's not a short distance. We have to own a pickup truck in order to do that. So why am I paying all this tax dollar? What am I getting out of it?
reality, nothing.
I'm not getting a service, And to my mind, my taxes should be lessened because I'm not getting, I don't get a water or sewer hookup, and I'm paying more than the people who are up on the main road that get those services.
That's the issue that municipal units have had for a long time on private roads. That word is there, private, has nothing to do with us. And when a person builds or buys a piece on a private road, that should register right away. I get nothing, but I still pay the same as the person that
But I'm not
does.
paying the same. I'm paying more than the people that are out on the main road. And I guarantee if I went and looked it all up, I guarantee you I'm paying more if my house was up on Lakeside Road than what I'm paying because I'm down next to bigger, fancier houses. I'm paying
Okay.
for the area that I'm in, and I get less
Yeah,
service.
have to take that up with PVSC.
Well,
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, and that's a challenge in itself.
Yeah.
And so on.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, these people deserve an answer, is all I'm saying. And I think you know what the answer was.
There is no answer.
Councillor Durkee.
I have a question through you, Mr. Chair, to Roger, because I can't answer this question. When someone builds a subdivision, is the developer own that road? Is it registered as a piece of property when a subdivision is developed, is the first part of the question. And then I'll go from there, if that's okay.
So, if someone builds a subdivision, that's not always done by a separate piece of land like that makes up the road. It could oftentimes be just a right-of-way across a number of lots that becomes a burden to all those lots. So, up until with our current subdivision bylaw, there's no requirement for a road to be a separate PID number. Therefore, no one really owns it.
Okay.
Now,
so-
I'm not
and
sure
that's-
if I answered that.
Well, it does,
Okay.
and I think that might help Sandra have a better understanding.
Yeah.
So of any of the subdivisions that we already have, no one, it's up to either the developer or the homeowners to maintain that road, if I'm correct.
That's right.
Correct?
Yeah.
So it's not registered. So there's a question that confused me because one of the questions I have is how can something like that go up for tax sale? It wouldn't. That's not going to, a road is or is not going to go up for tax sale.
They do, because most of them are registered separately. Our cottage, it's a road that goes over each person's property. That's different.
Right.
In these subdivisions, they're actually registered with their own PID number.
So-
Dave Hall, when he built it, told us that from the get-go, and that his plan was to let it go to tax sale.
Okay, so,
An official road name and everything.
okay, so that's,
So I'm going to
Right.
stick my oar in here where I would probably like to have some legal counsel to see if I'm absolutely right, but I don't think it's necessarily automatic. If someone's land gets taken over by, because they've had to pay their taxes, that it becomes the municipality's property. That's not an automatic thing.
Right.
It would become the municipality's property if the municipality chose to do so.
Right.
But it's not automatic. So that-
Okay, so, but in this situation, this piece of property has gone up for tax sale? Does that make sense? A road that goes, they're saying, yeah.
Taxes aren't being paid, it will.
Right, so, but that's what I'm not understanding is why is a road going up for tax sale, or why, this seems quite different from most of the subdivisions, because the road would not be, it's a road, so it doesn't, it's not owned by somebody.
Of a road having its own separate PID number.
Right, that's
I
why
always
I'm,
thought that they were, private roads like that were a right-of-way across an existing property.
yeah, no, well, I mean, yes, but for any of the other subdivisions, or do they have their own separate PID number? And if they don't, then this is certainly a unique case that has to be discussed.
They would have a plan of subdivision where the road, the private road, is separate from every individual lot on there. When these people buy on that private road, they're not buying any portion of that road. That is a separate, built-in part of the plan of subdivision, and all the individual lots are deeded, surveyed, et cetera, et cetera. So that roadway, that private roadway becomes a separate parcel of land, separate and apart from each of those individual lots.
And they typically, the developer will put it in a numbered company so they have no liabilities.
So,
And if I may, my name's Dana Parsons, I'm not up there because I'm loud enough. I think what will solve your problems, quite frankly, if you want to start some new subdivision laws and regulations, you make it imperative for a regulation that the developer shall and will maintain his road. It's his road, he owns that property, he wants to access that land so he can profit off the selling of lots, and we would never be here tonight. If you could invoke some kind of regulation that says, Mr. Developer, if you're going in there, from this day on, when you register your plan of subdivision, it's your road. End of story. We wouldn't be here.
We have a
And
deed.
as long as there was something built in, that when we start complaining about the potholes or whatnot, he's held accountable in some way. The same way as you guys are trying to hold all of us homeowners accountable for maintaining the road. It's not our road. The developer should be held accountable for his road. No different than the town of Yarmouth is held responsible to maintain Stars Road and Main Street. It's no different. And we would not be here if there was a regulation, again, I'm just repeating myself now, that said, Mr. Developer, it's your road. And furthermore, is it your road? It's your land that you want to access and sell all these lots off of. And the homeowners would have zero problems.
Morris, can you add to this, because you worked on, is this the norm, or is it the norm that the homeowners, so once all the pieces of property are sold from a subdivision, is that the responsibility of a developer to maintain that, or always has been, or in general, is the property?
They walk away from it, they couldn't care less if it goes to tax sale.
Yeah, but if the pieces of property, what happens when all the pieces of property are not sold, then they still have to maintain it in order to sell the rest of their property.
Limit they took to whatever standards they choose. That's what I mean, there has to be standards. Like I said, they all just walk away from it because they know what's going to happen. They're going to lose in tax. They don't want that responsibility.
Morris?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I was asked if I could make a comment. This situation is not unique to the municipality of the District of Yarmouth. I sit in on the meetings with the planning directors from all the municipalities across Nova Scotia. And once you're outside the towns, you run into this whole matter of private roads. And planners for years have been saying, this is an issue that has to be dealt with. What'll happen here is that a developer will set up a company, for example. This is typically what can happen. Everybody knows it's a private road, or they should. I'll just comment briefly on Green Rock Drive, because that's what we're talking about here after. The developer will develop the properties, get them approved, and at the moment, there's no requirement that that road be identified as a separate lot for a separate PID. And in many cases, they're not. There are right-of-way over properties. There are so many combinations that I would be here quite a while to talk about them. But in the end, when the lots are sold, the developer will just abandon the road, and if he set up a company to do his development and he gets in trouble, he'll simply close the company down. And there's no way of putting a lifetime liability onto the developer to maintain the road. If I may finish, please. That was one of the key issues that was identified when we had the public consultation process, that we have to do something about private roads. And the recommendation that we've put forward to the PAC and to council is that a private road be considered a separate lot, that there be a mandatory homeowners association set up, that as the developer sells off the lots, and he sold more than half of the building lots, that the ownership of that road go to the homeowners association, and that they are responsible for the maintenance of the road. I think on Green Rock Drive, there was a little bit of a difference here as I've picked up some of the history as I went along. It was one that got caught in that transition when the Department of Highways decided they were not going to take over. There was an exchange between highways and the municipalities in terms of the, I think they're called J-class roads. And this is one that was caught in the transition. It wasn't quite ready to be taken over when it happened, and it fell kind of beneath the cracks. I have great empathy for these people. I've driven that road a number of times, and it's not an easy road to drive. I just have gone to have a look at it 2 or 3 times, because to me it's a prime example of the issue that you're trying to address here with future developments and the recommendations that have been put before you. In going back to look at where you go from here, I think the 2/3 requirement is from your local improvement bylaw, which says, for example, if you were on a street, say a publicly owned street that wasn't paved, that you can apply to council, and if 2/3 of the owners apply, the council can pave the street and bill the adjacent owners. That doesn't apply to private roads at the moment. It's an issue, as you said, Mr. Chairman, that you'll have to take up and discuss at council as to whether you want to take a look at that bylaw and make it do other things for you. But that's where the 2/3 come from the local improvement bylaw. Now, you can change that to a different percentage, but you'd have to have at least 50%, I'm sure. I went through this with the town of Yarmouth, and we used your bylaw as a model when I went with the town, but except we put 50% instead of 2/3.
I was going to say, having said all that, that's still, every bit of that is alleviated. If we are here tonight, and you people apparently have been for months, to make new regulations to subdivision plans. And I can appreciate what this gentleman has said. I think it's Morris, I didn't get his last name. Lloyd. Or maybe Morris is over there. Yeah. But if you see what I mean, yeah, they put it in a number company to walk away from it. Now we're talking about a 2/3 vote or a 50% vote, but you don't need any of that. If you want to implement new regulations with respect to subdivisions, which is what the meeting is for, We all know that plans of subdivision are registered with the municipality, and if we can get it across to our developers from the get-go that it's your road. And if you want to make a road, then you would have to maintain it. Just as part, and that'll become the norm down the road. Again, nobody here would be complaining. Because we know that Dave Hall, bless his heart, who's passed away, would be responsible for that road. And don't get me wrong, there has to be something to ensure that he does. Right? Some kind of penalty. If we bitch enough that my road's in terrible shape, and he just refuses, so to speak, the same as I may refuse to pay homeowner association fees, there's going to be some repercussions to me. But all we need is that one single rule that every developer will soon become aware of, right? And God bless the rest of you, because you know they're going to come in and bitch to you that they don't want the road. But man, you're the one in there selling those lots, making the profit, and then you just turn away and walk away from it. That's not right, and I really don't think it's right. The municipality is considering throwing the hardships back at us homeowners to build up the road to spec. We bought and have our deed, you've got that land too, the road. And to me, it's no simpler than that. Going to be a lot of debate, but he owns it and they just walk away from it, and here we are, all in grief and stress. He got his money and he ran. And like I said, you just have to implement a regulation from now on for those people wishing to build a subdivision. You will be responsible for the road. It's no more than that. Build the regulation, build to your specs, whatever it may be, and these are the repercussions if you don't maintain it. You say, I'm going to get kicked out of the county or town if I have unsightly premises, and I don't deal with my unsightly premises. Well, you can consider a road an unsightly premise if it's got 5,000 potholes in it and a culvert that's been washed away. And to me, with all this discussion and with what Lloyd said, we don't even need that. Hold the developer accountable. End of story.
This is the reason why we hold public information meetings for inputs like this. Thank you very much, Dana. And I do have a question for the first gentleman that spoke, Mr. Hubbard. Are you speaking about the same road?
Green Rock Drive.
Okay.
Heaven forbid there ever be a fire on that road.
Councillor Cushing.
How's that?
Works.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize for being late, but I had some things I had to straighten up before I left home. Green Rock Drive has been on my agenda ever since I got elected back in 2006.
Down there, Dave.
Yes, I was. I've been down there.
Don't live.
I talked to you, didn't I not? You didn't live in the trailer?
Before the election, right.
Well, before the election, but I
Do grand things.
No, but I've been on the road and I traveled the road. Well, I have. Anyway, that's been on my agenda since I got elected. And my fellow councilors and Morris knows that it's been a concern of mine and I've been pushing for it, to have something done to it. Now, first of all, they come back with all these private roads. Look at it, there's too many private roads. So we started looking at them, and I look at them, some of these so-called private roads, when you drove on, there were one lane, the alders hit your vehicle as you went in. So I said, they're not private roads. So my explanation of a private road was what Green Rock Drive was built for. It was built to highway standards at the first, but the developer reneged on his part to finish off the gravel part of it. The road is the right width, the ditches are there, the curves are right, everything is right. All I had to do was that finished grade. And I've been pushing council, and you can ask my fellow councilors that, I've been arguing with them, that we have to do something with Green Rock Drive. So the best we've come up with so far is what Morris has told us about doing a subdivision bylaw where the homeowners association and things like that we could do. But I think in our bylaws now, if I'm correct, that if a developer wants to develop a subdivision, he's responsible for that road, correct? Am I right on that? Future developments.
Sorry. The way it is, the developer is responsible for the construction of the road to the standard of the municipality.
Right, which we have,
Right.
which
Which is,
we've worked on.
in your proposed manual and in the bylaw. And he's also responsible for setting up a homeowners association.
Okay,
And when half the lots are sold, the ownership of the road, and the road is clearly identified as a separate piece of property with a PID,
yeah,
the ownership is transferred to the homeowners association for them to maintain. But
okay.
it's
so-
not transferred as a public street.
Okay,
Well,
but
you're-
we've come a
that's
long
different.
ways from when we first started with this. We've come a long way since we first started with this. And it's obviously, you know, for some of the comments we're getting, I think we have to go further again. But that's my opinion. But I have been up there, I have drove on it, I've counted the houses, and I've seen all the, I didn't go visit the houses, no, I never. I think there were 16, well, 17 now, I believe. There's a new one being built there, correct?
But right now, we have no fire service, we have no.
You have nothing there. Absolutely right. And it's not right. I agree 100%, it's not right.
I mean, if fire trucks didn't get in the.
You guys pay your taxes?
Yes, we do.
That's right. That's right. So there's no reason why you shouldn't have the same type of service that everybody else pays, sir. I agree with you 100%. Good question.
Because we're trying to prevent situations like that from ever happening again. That's why we're here.
That's what we're trying to prevent, but also I'd like to see something remedied to the private roads that are built to standards. I'd really like to see something happen there.
How many private roads are there?
How many private roads are there? There's all kinds.
Well, it's just overall, how many private roads?
You know, if you had gotten a letter to come to that first meeting,
Huge amount of them anyway.
you would know.
There was a lot of them, you know that. And we went through, and then I picked out Green Rock Drive as a perfect example.
My next question.
Built by standards, but, you know, I'm one person.
Councillor Durkee.
Thank you. How can they not have fire service? Everybody has to have fire service.
Because if they get down the road, no emergency vehicle's gonna come down that road and take it in.
Is that the town responsible for that area?
I live in a.
And they've actually said, is there confirmation that they wouldn't, like, I just, yeah, if there's, safety is an issue, then,
Once they went in 50 feet on that road, they probably bounced
Exactly.
fire truck to pieces.
It's probably getting
That's right.
hot in the potholes.
The ambulance service
If
as
you've
well.
never driven on Green Rock Drive, this week, pick a drive.
happily, yeah, for sure.
And
Wow.
we're the only road, I'm sure there are hundreds of them.
The thing about Green Rock Drive, though, it's not a separate issue from this, but it's an issue that council is going to have to look at in the very near future, because this is the whole situation that we're trying to prevent from happening again.
But what happens to that road? Everybody got a notice that the road was up for tax sale because the gentleman along the road.
No.
That passed away, the road had gone to his estate, it's up for tax sale, so what?
Now, that, like I said, that's something that I didn't know about. This is the first I've ever heard of a private road having a PID number. To be very honest, I didn't know that.
My question is why wasn't everybody that lives on the roads that are concerned here sent the letter for the meeting that was here in the summer and for the meeting that was coming up?
It wasn't.
Because we all have our part in the road. We should all know. It should be sent to one or two people and then hope they may go down the road and tell people.
Morse?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, there was a pretty heavy distribution of letters that ended up going to people on Green Rock Drive. We didn't send a letter out to everybody, but the public meeting was advertised and so forth. And we had pretty good representation. Roger and I had the meeting, and we had pretty good representation from Green Rock Drive. And may I finish? including a nice video done by a 12-year-old girl as her father drove down the street, showing us how the holes in the street. I'd already driven the street a couple of times, and I've driven it again since then. But we had a pretty good representation from Green Rock Drive when we had the public session.
Is there any more questions or comments?
Lady here tonight? No.
Well, I know, Sandra Carson's again, I know when I received the letter and that for tonight's meeting, I was a little upset by the fact that it's been going on since April, because I get a tax bill and I pay my taxes and you have no problem finding my mailbox to send me my bill. But when it comes to something that is important, like ownership of roads and what you might have to do, turns out it's not gonna be a change for me. But you know everyone who lives on those private roads, and if there's something that's affecting people that are living on private roads and you wanna have a public meeting, then I think it's important that a letter goes to everybody that lives on those private roads, not just pick and choose one or two. Because I don't know if anybody else on my road got one.
Oh, you did.
No. I'm on Doctors Drive, Tranquility Crescent.
All right, to speak about this issue that you're specifically about Green Rock Drive, as a Planning Advisory Committee Chairman, we're supposed to speak about all municipal, or all private roads. However, when I do make my presentation to council next Wednesday, this one specific issue will be coming forward to council. It doesn't do you any good right now, but I will express your concerns to council of something of a concern that I heard during a public meeting, and it will be up to council at that time next Wednesday to decide which direction they're going to go.
And quite frankly, I was going to say, to drive my point home, and I know it won't help these people, but again, if you implement a new regulation that puts the onus on the developer, we would not have any more Green Rock roads. We would not be worrying about who's going to maintain it and who we're going to dump that responsibility onto when the developer walks away from it. I feel sorry for these folks. But again, if that single regulation, no 2/3 vote, no 50% vote, they're the ones that are profiting off of the construction of these subdivisions. And it's you people that approve, again, those plans of subdivision. And if they know from the get-go they're going to be responsible for it, end of story.
Thank you very much, Dana, for that. That's duly noted. Have it on my paper, a bunch of concerns that were brought up. Like I said, this will be brought forward to council next Wednesday evening. That's the best, not this Wednesday coming, not tomorrow, but a week Wednesday. Is there any more comments or concerns in regards to the document put forward to you? Is there any comments or concerns from committee members? Last and final chance. Hearing none, I'm going to call this portion of the meeting closed. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming in.